Hello everyone, and welcome back to AV Chess Lab as we continue our road to 2000 in rapid chess here on chess.com. So let's just get started with our first game of the day as we have the black pieces against Girait 944. So he starts out with c4, an English opening, and we're just gonna go for a setup with knight to f6. Something that I like to play against d4 and c4. Okay, so d3, a move that honestly I do not understand, since they could easily just push the pawn to d4 instead, just so that they can have more control of the center. But okay, they opted for d3, so let's go with c5. That way we control this square ourselves. Okay, so that's very logical. But as you can see, there's going to be some holes in the position that we can take advantage of later. So let's just solidify our pawn on c5 by playing d6. So our opponent plays g3 as they get ready to fianchetto their bishop to g2. So I like to always take my time in the opening, just so that I can make sure I understand where I want my pieces to be. So right now, I'm not sure where this bishop is going to go. It could potentially go here, or it could go there. And this knight could also go there or go here. So not sure. Okay, let's just go with knight to c6 and wait for my opponent to make some moves. So I'm expecting bishop to g2. And now we just have to make a quick move because our opponent seems to have a pretty good idea of what he wants to play. And I don't, based on how much time I have taken. Okay, but this is clearly a big blunder, since I could just capture that pawn with my knight. Not sure what his intention was with the move to e5, to be honest. And quite frankly, our position must be winning right now. So okay, he develops and attacks my knight, but we are simply going to retreat to c6. So based on what he did, I'm guessing his whole plan with playing e5 was that he could double my pawns here on c6. But at the expense of a pawn, I don't think that was such a great idea in his part. Okay, so here now, we could capture on b2, but he simply takes here with check. And I don't want to allow him that move. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to throw in this bishop to g4, get his queen off the diagonal. And if it does move away from the diagonal, for example, to e3 or f4, then we're simply going to capture his pawn on b2, threatening the rook and threatening queen to c1 checkmate in some situations. Okay, so I like our game very much. But this is chess and anything could happen. Let's see how my opponent will react to this bishop g4 idea. Okay, so he decided to resign, and it's a very logical move in this position. I mean, if the queen moved from the diagonal, we were simply going to capture on b2. So okay, let's take a quick look at the game report to see if we can learn anything from this game. Okay, so here, just based on the accuracy report alone, I am not too happy with my 91.2, but I don't think I played too bad, considering my opponent just gave us a free pawn right away from the opening. So let's see. English opening, I play knight to f6, which are all book moves. d3, of course, like I said, not the best. And the computer suggestion is my suggestion as well, which was to go to d4 and take advantage of the center, at which point we would have played normal chess d4, queen pawns openings with d4. Okay, so here, c5, just putting some pawn in the center as well, so we can start creating some weak squares for our opponent. Here he continues with the move to e4, which the computer says it's a good move, but it's not the best, but I don't see anything wrong with it at the moment. d6, g3, and here we continued with our plan of knight to c6, bishop to g2, and we simply played g6 as we were getting ready to put our bishop on g7 when our opponent decided to blunder by giving us a free pawn, which we took. And after knight bishop to f4, knight back to c6, this had to be a big inaccuracy, as we mentioned, since our opponent is giving us a bishop for a knight. So I don't really understand this move, but okay. We had to take queen to f3, queen to b6, and after bishop to g5, which was a major blunder, just this move, which is the best move in the position, seems to win the game, and our opponent resigned here. So a quick look at the analysis, just so that we can better understand why our opponent resigned. So as I mentioned, if he goes to e3, we can simply capture this pawn here, and then there's no way to protect this rook. And if we try something like this, we can simply just recapture with our queen here, and this threat is still happening. So nothing much to say about this game. So let's move on to game number 2 of today. So new 10-minute game. Okay, so we have the white pieces. So we're gonna play e4 like I usually do, and we're playing against chessmate Steve. And chessmate Steve is 1 point away from the century mark of 1000. Of course, he's higher rated than we are. So d6, a Pirc defense. So the idea here is that they're going to play some hyper modern thing with pawn to g6, bishop to g7, knight to f6, c6, b5, and in some cases queen to a5. That's the those are like the main line, the main moves that you're going to play with in the Pirc defense. And you don't put any pressure on the center with your pawns, but you start putting pressure in the center with your pieces. But since he's opting for that, we're just going to put our pawns in the center and ask him to bring it. So okay, so far he's playing all the logical moves that they play in the Pirc defense, and we're just going to develop our pieces and place them where they can give support to these two pawns in the center. So here now I'm just going to castle with my king in safety. And notice that I did that even before developing these two pieces, just because I'm not quite sure what to do with them at the moment. There's some ideas of putting this pawn to c3, bishop to, not to d2, well, bishop to e3 and knight to d2. But bishop to e3 right away runs into knight g4, which I don't like. And I really don't want to have to spend a tempo at the moment on h3 just to prevent that move from happening. So in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and put my rook in the center where it belongs and also support my pawn on e4. So notice here that he goes for bishop to g4. And now he has a big decision to make if I play h3. A move that I wanted to play, but now I can play almost for free because I'm attacking his piece. And if he goes back, then we can simply play bishop to e3, which is what we wanted to begin with. The other thing he can do, instead of going back, he can capture my knight, which should be in our favor as well, since we're going to have the bishop pair. So playing h3 here seems very logical. And of course, instead of retreating, he decides to trade on f3, which makes a lot of sense. Now, an idea here is to go knight to c6 with the idea to play e5. But okay, my opponent goes for h6 which honestly, I'm having a hard time figuring it out. I'm not sure what he is intending to do. Maybe knight to h7, knight to g5. But he's really going to waste 2 moves just to attack my queen and bring it back into another square. Okay, the other option here that I have, and I really like, is that this pawn on b7 is no longer protected by the bishop. So if we somehow push this pawn forward, we can be attacking the knight and we can be attacking the pawn. So it seems to me that after we push, he takes, I take, his move is to go knight to d5 in order to save his b7 pawn. But then after knight to d5, I mean, c4 doesn't quite work yet because of knight here. It's all very interesting. It's all very interesting, I gotta say. Okay, I still believe pushing is the way to go. My king is rather safe, and I don't really have to play c4. I could go for another move. I mean, I could easily take here first and then go for it, which now that I'm thinking about it, taking on b7 makes a lot of sense. Taking on b7 at the moment makes some sense. Yeah, why not? He has to do something about this rook. When the knight moves, we simply capture. And then he no longer has this knight to d5 idea. All right, I think we're back in business. The only issue, and it's a big issue, is that we're down to less than 6 minutes, and my opponent still has more than 9. But at the moment, I very much like where we stand with the fact that we're up so much material. I mean, not so much material, but a clean pawn. So here my opponent obviously is forking my queen and bishop, so we have to retreat. And if he takes my bishop, I'm simply going to recapture with my queen. That way, after queen takes, pawn takes, when he moves his knight, we can solidify our pawn on e5 with the move to d4. But okay, this game is far from over, and my opponent obviously has a lot of great ideas to continue. Now he's attacking this pawn with 2 pieces, and he's also protecting his knight with his knight. So still a very complicated position to play. So what should we do? I mean, this move has to be played. I honestly don't see how else to protect my pawn. But now I don't necessarily need to take with my pawn. So let's take advantage of the fact that queen takes doesn't actually bring a queen trade. So these 2 pawns are weak, and we're going to put some pressure on them. And if we're allowed to play knight to c3 and rook a to d1, as so, our position is going to be absolutely amazing. So let's see what my opponent comes up with. Okay, it's a very logical move. He's putting pressure on my b2 pawn, and I don't really want to have to use one of my pieces to protect it, so I'm just going to go b3, which is in some cases could be very dangerous, but at the moment I honestly don't see how my opponent can take advantage. Okay, so here f5 is a nasty continuation if my opponent decides to go for f6 with a similar idea. The idea behind f5 was that f4 could be played in some situations, but here now we're very close. But notice how I really don't mind if this pawn gets to e5. Even if he gets the pawn back, his pawn situation is going to be so terribly bad that I don't mind. I don't mind if that's what he wants. If that's the way he wants to recapture his pawn, I honestly don't mind it. And now we're going to use a basic principle in chess of blockading. So notice now that his bishop on g7 is just a very big pawn. And now we can simply move our rook to d1. And if this knight ever gets out of the way, we give a check on c4, and the rook will capture his queen. So there is a big threat of rook a d1 in the position, in which if he's not careful, he will go down a lot of material. So let's see. But it's almost getting to that point where the clocks are going to be significant, and they're going to have something to say. So I very much like for him to play knight f6. Of course, I'm not going to trade queens. I'm going to give a check, and then maybe play rook to d1. But for sure, I am not taking his knight on f6. Okay, very nice move. Since now, obviously, queen to f7 can no longer be, queen to c4 can no longer be played with check. So it's a very nice way. He did see the idea behind rook a d1 and queen c4 check. At least I think he did, because he ended up playing rook to f7. The problem with rook to f7 is now this knight is pinned, and he can move it out of the way because we simply take the queen, and we win a rook this way. So he has to go for pawn to e6. But after pawn to e6, he simply loses the game with after knight to c5. Since we're just going to capture one of his pieces for free. So I think at this point, his position is resignable, since there's no easy way to protect against that threat. So okay, so he decided to part ways with the knight. I noticed that his queen is trapped, so he must trade it, or if he moves it, we're going to trade it, just so that we can have an easier game. If the queens are off the board, we're off material, it's just going to be much easier for us to play. And then we don't have to worry about any checkmating plans, or even perpetual checks if the queen remains on the board. So okay, the clocks are getting closer, and now that we're on material, I should be able to play a bit quicker. So time should not be a factor. I could always play f3. Notice that my knight on e4, and his bishop from g7 can never capture my knight on e4. So if he ever wants to remove this knight from here and improve his bishop situation, which at the moment it looks just like a pawn but a little bit bigger, he would need to sacrifice his rook for the knight. But this is a big blunder, since the same idea from before, same tactical motive. We just capture, we check, and after the king moves, we take the rook. We take his queen with our rook. So no matter what he does, this move is coming. Matter of fact, I like it so much, I'm going to pre-move it. Okay, so from this moment on, this is just going to be a matter of time. So I'm just gonna look for a way to trade some pieces, trade one of the rooks, maybe trade my bishop for his bishop, and the rest is not gonna be a big issue. But this is just a free rook as well, and my opponent is simply just collapsing at the end. But all right, he played very well until that moment in which he gave us the free pawn at least. But let's take a quick look at the game report just to see how we did in general. All right, not bad, 96.8 accuracy. I'm very happy with that. Although we did have a mistake, which I'm very intrigued to see what it was. So let's take a quick glance at the analysis. So so far, all book moves, and I believe we're going to be in book all the way until right here. I believe this is the first move that's not a book move. Although rook e1 is not the book move, if we continue the lines, we will have, eventually I will have to play rook e1, and it will just transpose into the main line of the Pirc. But rook e1, I just wanted to have more flexibility since I wasn't sure where my knight and bishop on the queen side were going to go. So that's the idea behind it. And then he plays bishop g4. But remember, I wanted to play h3. So he was forced, not forced, but taking is the more logical of the situations, since retreating the bishop makes no sense. So I capture back. And here is where he made the first inaccuracy of the game. And notice how in the game I actually mentioned that he should have gone for that idea of knight to c6 followed by e5. So now we get the opportunity after h6 to play our pawn to e5, threatening both the knight and the pawn on b7. So he takes our pawn, we take on b7, and he plays the best move, which is knight to d7, which is very logical since he has to protect the rook on a8. Here we simply capture the pawn, and he again surprised us with the best move, which was knight to c5, forking the bishop and queen. So I retreated, and it's saying that the best move is to go queen to c6. So let me try to understand the idea behind queen to c6. So I'm guessing if queen to c6, if he takes here, we can simply take this one instead. But no, it's saying that that's a blunder. So it's not that. So what is it? Do we simply just take? And we're up material? I guess it is. It's that simple. Okay. What I didn't like about this is what happens if, okay, like knight there, how do I protect this pawn? Do I need to come back in order to protect that pawn? Something like queen to c2? Okay. Who knows? Well, okay, I will play queen to f3, knight to d7, which was some kind of an inaccuracy. And here we continue with bishop to f4, protecting our pawn on e5. We took, and rook to b8, b3, and g5, bishop g3, f6. So f6 was the big blunder, besides that other one and in the beginning. And from here, knight here is saying that it's a mistake. It's saying we should play queen c4, check. But then what? The king moves, king to h8, and how do we follow this? It says we play e takes f6, but then bishop takes, and I'm guessing it's saying we can just simply move our knight out of the way. Okay. Yes, it's good, but I don't think what we played is less strong. So going back to the position here, I think what we played with knight to d2 is very logical, since I do like my blockade idea on e4. So from now, this game is just a matter of making the moves, and our opponent finally blundered here, and we were able to win the game. So far, 6 games, 6 wins. We're moving quite nicely up to 2000. Our rating at the moment is 1019, so we still have quite a bit to go. And the game should start getting tougher as we hit the 1500 and above rating, since our opponents are going to have a better idea how to play chess and are going to be better prepared in general, especially in the opening. So I just want to thank everybody for watching. And if you want to catch parts 1 and 2, I would have them in the description of the video, so you can take a look at them. And as always, stay safe, have a great day, and always respect your opponent. Have a nice day.